Hello, thanks for joining in. Welcome to today's broadcast. I hope you missed me, any of my usual viewers, and I hope you're all trying your best to keep up with the live trial that's happening right now under Mitch McConnell's weird rules of having 24 hours worth of information allowed to be presented by both sides, as it were, the people laying out Trump's crimes and misconduct, and his lawyers pretending that crime is fine and that the president is above the law. So they both have 24 hours that has to be used within a 48-hour period, and the Senate sits at 1 p.m. So the Democrats have had to choose whether or not they're going to go for two 12-hour stretches starting at 1 p.m. and ending at 1 a.m. in the morning before resuming again the next day at 1 p.m. Also, they've changed it to 3 days now. Excellent. That's a good update. In any case, what's just passed is a split along party lines vote in which Senate Republicans have essentially quashed the hope of bringing witnesses and documents into the trial. They're new witnesses, so being able to subpoena John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, any of the other complicit White House administration folk who were part of Trump's drug deal, as it were. Yes, so they're allowing previous evidence, but they have to type it or present it in new documents afresh. So yes, but more significantly than saying the senators are cultists, we can say they're part of a criminal cult, because there is a degree of awareness that what they're doing is wrong and then what Trump has done is wrong and a very significant betrayal of the American Constitution, and that he's catering to a minority of American voters who don't mind anymore if American laws are broken and if the American Constitution is overturned, provided they get the power that they felt was slipping from their grasp and that they feel is rightfully theirs and that they wish to impose on the rest of the country. So when I say minoritarian authoritarians, I mean to say those both theologically driven and those financially driven criminals who are happy to upend America. So yes, the only thing I would add is not to be concerned with the phrase history will not be kind to them, because we're engaged in essentially a fight for our lives in which if they are the victors, they will write history. And we can just assume that they won't win, but that's not an evidence-based assumption. Sometimes might win, sometimes the wrong people doing the wrong thing win. So I'm here to suggest that a belief in karma is misguided, and a belief in the arc of history bending towards justice is also misguided. I think I came across a quote saying, "Those who love peace must learn to organize as well as those who love war." So that's really what I want to be part of. And I came across a Twitter thread yesterday by somebody who's written a book showing that, yes, rather than just engaging in an endless emotional, intellectual gratification cycle on Twitter, it's been shown that participating locally in politics rather than devoting hours of our lives to a political hobby of indulging in our confirmation bias within our circle of friends and fellow thinkers on the internet, we need to be doing more to make that a real life interaction with others who might not otherwise be exposed to the logic and the evidence underpinning our devotion to politics at this critical point in our collective history. So we have some trolls. Oh, Mr. Ed, I'm glad you're happy to see me. I will put your comment up on the screen for validation. And how can we get rid of these trolls? I know what we can do. I can go online separately and try to block them. If there's anybody else who needs to be appointed as an administrator, let me know. I'm always on the lookout for more administrators, people who can help me with blocking troll comments that interfere with the general working of this broadcast. Now, what can happen here? Let's see. So this is my hand here. I want to bring along a whiteboard, but I don't think it's going to fit very much. Ta-da. All right, so if I can write on that whiteboard and then sort of pull it towards me, that might work. You muted them. I am grateful. Somebody called Harvested Beasts. Ah, yes, Norma Jean, thank you so much. Good work. I'll try not to move the screen around so abruptly. So what else is the news that we can share with each other? What I've got up on screen is a Jumbotron that's currently outside the United States Senate right now, and it's playing footage from the House hearings. So even though new witnesses aren't permitted, according to to Mitch McConnell's success in shutting down the Schumer amendments, proposing subpoenaing various relevant witnesses, at least for the onlookers outside the Senate, there is this exposure. And I think Americans do understand that they should pay closer than ever attention to what is being so carefully concealed from them. That there's so much effort and energy being put in by the criminal mastermind, Mitch McConnell. I call him a criminal mastermind because he's clearly been dragging the United States Congress via his leadership of the Republican Party towards infamy for a long time. It's interesting that we had a comment saying someone has perfection in medical technology. Great for you. Lev Parnas's interview with Rachel Maddow is appearing. I heard Parnas say that Trump was at a dinner meeting in a hidden part of Trump Hotel that looks like a lighthouse. I'd love to get confirmation from anybody who's had the misfortune to go to Trump Hotel about some private room that looks like a lighthouse, but it might be super private, reserved only for Trump and his immediate circle of friends. Someone asks, we've been overthrown, but are the Republicans Russian agents or not? The word is assets. If you provide services to Russian intelligence operatives, if you provide service to the corrupt president of Russia, then you are a Russian asset. You are helping them. And essentially, a lot of the GOP have become Russian assets because they've accepted payments from the NRA. And as many of us know, the NRA funneled money from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, the wealthiest man in the world, to the Republican Party. So certainly the American government has been for sale to a significant degree for a while. That's why you have the highest homicide rate in the developed world. People often talk about gun violence, but they seem reluctant to take a step back and go, yes, not only does America have very high rates of gun violence, it has very high rates of homicides, in large part because your gun violence rate is so high, because guns are tools for making murder and suicide easier. So as somebody aptly said about all of the militia organizing and demonstrating in Virginia recently, these are afraid white men, very indulgent in anxiety and cyclical anxiety thinking that leaves them afraid that their government will treat them as badly as American governments have treated minority populations in previous eras and still to a degree currently. Somebody's pointing out that Jeff is the official wealthiest person in the world. Yes, Putin's wealth is largely derived from stealing from the Russian people and therefore has to be laundered and can't be as above board as Jeff Bezos's billions of dollars. So Putin allegedly has, I'll say reportedly, because there are reports and the Panama Papers leaked and one of the journalists involved in that reporting was murdered, but $200 billion in offshore accounts for Vladimir Putin. Sometimes in the offshore accounts of his friends. So a childhood friend who plays the cello has billions of dollars in his account. So there's not a great deal of point dithering about the fact that Vladimir Putin is extremely and criminally wealthy. I think we can be open in saying that. Jack's Sally Cat saying, I fear the impeachment trial will change no one's mind. But Sally, let's look at the psychology of Americans. There is certainly a strong degree of hyper-partisanship and hyper-tribalism at play, but there's also still a significant quantity of independents in the US, and their votes are critical in US elections. You still need to win a majority. So my concern is that everybody should be joining Fair Fight Action, which is a group that Abrams started. What's her name? Abrams. Anyway, her surname is Abrams, and you'll know her. She was a candidate for the Georgian governor. She was unsuccessful in that, but it's accepted by a lot of people now that the degree of voter repression carried out by the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, who coincidentally happened to be the Republican candidate for governor. So he was running in an election for governor that he was also controlling as Secretary of State in charge of polling booths and voting infrastructure. So many voting machines were left concealed in a factory. Other voting machines in districts that were predominantly African American, surprisingly, were issued without electrical cords, electrical extension cords, meaning they couldn't be plugged in, meaning there was a delay. So essentially, Abrams won the Georgian election for governorship if voting had been conducted appropriately, but Brian Kemp failed to recuse himself from his position as Secretary of State whilst running for governor of Georgia. So you had lunch today with a smart, independent person who feels confused and thinks both sides are rotten. Yes, well, that smart person is still a product of, I guess, the propaganda system that's very powerful in the US. So regardless of how smart anybody is, you can typically tell where their political loyalties lie by finding out from them what are their primary media sources. So if they have Facebook as a primary source of information, they'll be deluged with low quality, they'll be deluged with lies and disinformation. Thanks, Mark Zuckerberg, for profiting off the degradation of democracy. And somebody asks, if the Senate finds Trump innocent and Trump wins again, what will the impeachment affect? Oh, if Trump wins re-election, yes, that will be a very bad outcome. The Senate is already proving itself to be entirely given over to criminality and criminal obstruction of justice. So yeah, that is a problem, but a significantly high enough proportion of the American electorate at present already believe Trump to be guilty of abusing his power, and they already believe Trump to be guilty of improperly withholding American taxpayer money that had been duly appointed by Congress in order to use that money, which was not his, to extort, to bring improper influence to bear on the president of Ukraine, to co-opt the president of Ukraine into a cheating scandal whereby he would use President Zelensky to conceal from the public the origins of an investigation, to pressure Zelensky into starting an investigation that he would then not be truthful to the public about, that he would then say, this was all from my own initiative. I just decided of my own accord to investigate Joe Biden's son, and conceal that he had been asked to do so and pressured to do so by President Trump using $400 million or $391 million worth of American taxpayer money that had been duly appointed by a bipartisan vote in Congress to go towards supporting Ukraine as a military ally, as an ally of the US, finding itself under ongoing violent attack from Russia. Yes, we thank America. We thank Australia for Rupert Murdoch. It's got an H at the end of his name. I just tell you so that if you ever wish to participate in hashtags saying boycott Murdoch media, you can join in appropriately. It is a bit fancy, isn't it, John? We've got a screen up that looks to be historic footage of Lindsey Graham explaining why it's so important and so necessary to have witnesses in a impeachment trial in the Senate. I've seen footage of Lindsey Graham explaining various things now, why witnesses are important, why abuse of power is still a crime, and why the framers of the Constitution were keen to have a check on the president's powers if those powers were abused, if the rights and privileges associated with that office were abused to serve alternate interests and not the interests of the American people. So I like the way that Democrats have been framing this recently, really highlighting the fact that Trump betrayed the American people and the interests of the American people, that it weakens America militarily as well as geopolitically to have Trump abusing taxpayer funds, abusing the separation of powers. It's often not stressed that the executive branch has certain powers and Congress, the legislative branch, has certain powers. One of the powers of the legislative branch is the power of the purse. They make laws and they vote to distribute money collected by the government. And some of that money has gone through bipartisan votes and was determined to be used to support an American ally that's critical to preserving American influence and American power in the world, in the global hierarchy. Now, Republicans and Donald Trump like to pretend that it's not important anymore to preserve American geopolitical power and influence because they like to say, well, we have Trump on our side. All he has to do is keep saying how powerful we are, and that will make it true, because they understand that Trump will stop at nothing. Trump doesn't feel constrained by typical diplomatic standards. Trump will use nuclear weapons at the drop of a hat, and that's supposed to keep America safe instead of having geopolitical influence and hierarchical power as a superpower. Because, yes, Trump is now the only avenue for American throwing your weight around, to be done to support Saudi Arabia, to be done to support Russian interests, not to support American interests anymore, but Republicans hope to conceal that from as many American people as they can continue to hoodwink. And I just think that less of the American people are hoodwinkable than the GOP is gambling on. So now the other issue that we have to address is voter suppression and vote manipulation. So having voting machines that potentially are connectable to the internet, and if they're connectable to the internet, then they're hackable. So it's in all our interests now to demand of legislators at a state level to preserve election security. Trump's not going to do it at a federal level because it's not in his interest to protect the votes of American voters. He actively wants to help Russia change the voting tallies in swing states, in battleground states, to continue his time occupying the Oval Office. So it's not, beyond even getting out the vote, beyond talking people who don't customarily vote into the urgent need for them to vote, there is the question of devoting some time and resources to helping out African Americans whose voting rights are under attack from Republicans. They can do that because not just out of racism, but out of partisan desire to keep their criminal activities from oversight and prosecution and any type of consequences. So Republicans are targeting African American voters because they are a reliable Democrat voting bloc. So where you see poll taxes, unofficial poll taxes, such as Florida, where the governor, a Trump follower and Lev Parnas friend, Ron DeSantis, they have instituted laws saying you can't vote unless all of your fines have been paid. And people should know that African Americans are disproportionately prosecuted, disproportionately challenged, disproportionately stopped, disproportionately convicted of minor crimes, drug use that white people aren't convicted for, even when there is equivalent or indeed extra drug consumption patterns on the part of white drug users. It is still more likely to be black drug users who are pulled over, who have warrants given, who are the subject of investigations and prosecutions for drug use. So they're more likely to have fines and therefore more likely to be disenfranchised in terms of voting. So there's lots of measures that Republicans adopt in order to reduce the Democratic vote. No, in Australia, there's not voter suppression efforts. Everybody has to vote, so it all has to go ahead like that. We just have a lot of activity on the deception front. So Rupert Murdoch, who controls Fox News in the US, controls 70% of Australian print media, as well as having some of his millionaire buddies control a lot of the television media. So Australians are very much victimized by psychological warfare that preys upon people's character failings, preys upon any endemic racism in the community, any endemic low levels of education around climate change, around how fires start, etc. That's what Rupert Murdoch and his friends do when they try to convince Australians that it is individual activity that's responsible for fires. So they try to pretend that there's a crisis of individual accountability, that there's a crisis of law and justice, and that arsonists are responsible for Australia's severe, incredibly damaging fire season that we're still having. So what's been happening in Australia is because of climate change, the increased temperatures associated with that, there's been increased drought. Let's see if I can find this for you. There's a good fact sheet that I was reading today, if anybody wants to share it, if I have any Australian viewers. How are we going? Yes, I guess we've still got Norma Jean's comment up. I might post a comment myself. Rupert Murdoch. Now, the interesting thing is Rupert Murdoch, I had caps lock stuck. Rupert Murdoch erodes democracy. Something stronger than erodes. What's stronger? Rupert Murdoch deceives the public. All right, maybe that's something I should do on my own time. It's taking longer than I thought. Deceives the public. Yes, we have to find ways of effectively combating. There we go. All right. So let's have a look at the ACT TV. Oh, that looks like they're crossing live to Senator Collins, probably trying to defend herself. She might still be trying to pretend that Mitch McConnell's rules are following the Clinton precedent from Clinton's impeachment trial. As we all should know, that's ridiculous. There was no obstruction of justice at the House level. All the witnesses that they wanted to call were heard in the House and then heard again in the Senate. In the current trial, Trump and the White House obstructed justice to the fullest extent of their capabilities, and Democrats didn't pursue the subpoenas through the court system because that was going to delay the impeachment process in the House. So they asked John Bolton, but they didn't subpoena him because he announced that he was not going to obey a subpoena unless it was enforced by the courts. So Bolton has now said that he will obey a subpoena, but he may have done so safe in the knowledge that Republicans all intended to vote to exclude any subpoenas of witnesses in the Senate trial of Donald Trump. Yes, you do get fined if you don't vote in Australia. Oh, I'm just seeing some more of these suggestions that people had for verbs applied to Rupert Murdoch's effect on democracy. And democracy not just in Australia and the US, but also in the UK as well. where he has various publications that all manipulate language to manipulate the public, to capitalize on any geopolitical events that destabilize the world, to increase that fear of further destabilization, because fear is always a motivating factor in voting for Conservatives. Eventually, corruption sometimes becomes too obvious, and then people swing away from Conservatives. And I'm not saying corruption is only belongs to Conservatives. What I should say is people who have a strong cover story end up taking advantage of that for corrupt purposes. So the cover story for Conservatives at present is that Islamic extremism threatens the world, which it does. And that cover story had so much evocative resonance with members of the public that became a shield to them, like a dressing room changing. What's something that stands up in a changing room that you can hide behind? Anyway, a shield that they could then use as a pass to carry out any manner of corruption, corrupt additions to their political power and to their personal financial circumstances. That cover story had so much resonance that it could easily be taken advantage of. And the product of Conservatives across various Western states taking advantage of the terror inspired by Islamic fundamentalist terrorism has been to increase the amount of money that billionaires, that wealthy moneyed interests can introduce into the political system. So there was less protest. The Supreme Court, Conservatives on the Supreme Court could get away with introducing Citizens United. What's that, a 2008 or 2010 decision that allowed an influx of payments from corporations who have different interests to individuals and who are less shackled by individual consciences, but rather impelled forwards by corporate goals to increase profit at any cost. So sure, media manipulation has always existed. That's, I guess, a term for using power and influence to convince others. When done corruptly, then people lose out big time. And I think something that's very important in the era of Trump is to emphasize how corruption hurts people. Because a lot of people who have signed on board for Trumpism, or who have signed on for ignoring the worst criminal excesses, the most deleterious impacts of Trumpism, are often people who have convinced themselves that nothing matters, that as long as their personal wealth is increasing, then corruption, generally speaking, won't impact them. But living in an increasingly corrupt society doesn't just benefit the people, it doesn't just impact the people who haven't signed on. Saying, oh, look, America's falling into corruption shouldn't just be an incentive to support Republicans, because then you'll be a beneficiary of Republican corruption. Corruption means that bribes have to be paid to get ahead. Corruption doesn't just mean your tribe winning at the expense of others. It means living in a society that doesn't adhere to the rule of law as well as it once did. Living in a corrupt society where some people's votes are legally and illegally excluded without significant consequence means the economy will suffer. Those people with less means will suffer first. They will lose out on distribution of public funds. They won't have a sufficient garbage collection. Rural hospitals will close. But eventually, all of those, the cumulative effect of people incurring medical costs that they can't meet, people unable to access hospital care because rural hospitals have closed down, that adds up and has the cumulative effect of dragging a society down. Have I missed some comments? No, just Harvested Beast telling me that, surprise, media manipulation is not new. Media manipulation has hit critical fascistic levels under Rupert Murdoch and his cronies. It should be also noted that a lot of his friends are very wealthy coal barons. So there's loyalty that Rupert Murdoch has, but it's not to America, it's not to Australia, it's not to the UK. Rupert Murdoch's loyalty is to his wealthy peers. And I wanted to point out before that earlier on in the 2000s, was it 2013? Rupert Murdoch was supporting climate science and was introducing policies so that Murdoch media organizations reduced their carbon emissions. Oh, look, there's Lev still talking. Nice. So what happened to change Rupert Murdoch's mind? I don't know. He may have just opportunistically realized that there was political power to be gained from denying climate change. He may have realized that the Australian public was sufficiently gullible that you could just switch sides and tell them it was all a beat up and a lie. Perhaps his coal mining, prospecting baron friends told him it will hurt our profit margins too much if Australia pursues a corrective course of action on climate change and seeks to prevent the death of millions of people and billions upon billions of animals and sea creatures. So we don't often talk about how ocean temperatures have been experiencing massive hotspots that have killed birds and killed fish and other sea life, which will devastate all of the countries that have significant food requirements met by protein sourced from the ocean. So all of the non-highly industrialized societies where there are significant fishing economies, fishing industries, those people will be that much closer to starvation as a consequence of people still debating climate change rather than demanding concerted and effective action on climate change. Oh, I feel sad that we don't have any commentators anymore. I miss my friends, but that's okay. I'm sure somebody will come back. An account called Harvested Beast has said, maybe climate change impacted his pineapple empire. Once it didn't matter, he moved on. Does Rupert Murdoch have a pineapple empire? All right, well, perhaps I've talked for long enough today. I can still see the testimony of Marie Yovanovitch happening in the background. I can see that GOP cover-up is still a trending hashtag, which is important. It does sadden me a little bit to still see hashtags trending that are about sport or television shows, just because we are medicinally treating our angst. We are medicinally treating ourselves with pop culture and entertainment and sport and diversions. Diversions that we're encouraged to participate in because danger is so very thoroughly impacting us. So in Australia, I guess you could stay indoors and watch television and try techniques to minimize smoke in your home, but it was hard to get away from the apocalyptic conditions of the fires. And of course, now there are other climate change problems happening as well. There's been very destructive hailstorms in Australia's capital, and there've been dust storms caused in no small part by the drought, by the fact that vegetation anchoring topsoil in the ground has now burnt to a crisp, unleashing huge, massive dust storms upon various rural communities in Australia. Millions of animals, over 1 billion animals have been estimated to have been incinerated directly in the fires, but millions more are likely to be starving to death now and dying of thirst, even as much as people are trying to provide some food and water for them on the margins of human settlement. You can see lots of kangaroos and wombats congregating at people's homes that have put out food and water for animals. But just imagine all the areas where animals haven't been able to reach human dropped supplies, and they're just suffering and dying slow, painful deaths. So I don't enjoy talking about this, but it's an inevitability at present that climate change will escalate. We're still on a trajectory of massively depleting the remaining carbon budget that stood between us and a 2-degree temperature rise. So we were hoping, if people listened to the science and people called for concerted action on the part of leaders worldwide, to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. Does Rupert have 20 billion? I know that Vladimir Putin is estimated to have 20 billion. I don't know what Rupert Murdoch's personal wealth is. I don't think it's as significant as 20 billion. Oh, wow, did you compliment me and somebody blocked it? They might be worrying that you're a troll, Mr. Ed, trying to sidetrack the conversation. Tell me your compliment again. I am quite happy to have it. And I am sad that the feminist movement to reconfigure society in a way that's more respectful towards women has alienated some men and has made people feel too much that it's common sense to reject compliments. I'm happy for men to open doors or compliment women. Anything that serves as a reminder that, yes, might is not always right. It's worth valuing in any society women who at various times in their lives are likely to be physically weaker than men. I know as a 9-month pregnant woman, there is no man that could not have outrun me. No man with functional legs. And most women with functional legs could have outrun me as well. So there is a biological imperative, not a biological imperative, there should be a cultural imperative to occasionally recognizing that women aren't always as strong as men, that there are certain circumstances in which women are biologically likely to be more fragile, and that if we don't make gestures, if we don't reinforce our commitment as individuals and as a society towards protecting and caring for women who can be vulnerable, then we are abandoning ourselves to a more exploitative and casually cruel attitude. Because if we surrender to might is right, then we can say, yep, don't help women, don't open the door for women, don't allow women to trade off their beauty as a power tactic anymore, when it is likely that men are to a degree emotionally subjugated by visual appeals, by the visual appeal of women being attractive. And that's something that has helped glue together families and relationships, has helped overcome people's wish to get their own way, that they've been able to make sacrifices and cooperate in no small part because of the biological mechanisms of attraction and sexual activity and consequent release of bonding hormones such as oxytocin, etc. So, yes. Mr. Ed, I hope they didn't block you. Where's my compliment? I want my compliment again. I hope, keep it clean though, obviously, keep it clean. Mr. Ed might have gone away already. Oh, look, it looks like Lindsay Graham is up there again. I would love it if they could get some closed captions so that people with hearing impairments or people who can watch videos but can't turn on the sound could still see what's being said. And maybe there's somebody who could, maybe there are volunteers amongst us who could donate time to ACT TV. I believe it's their account that's broadcasting to this Jumbotron screen up outside the US Senate. People volunteering to transcribe this type of video, because I presume they'll keep running this video. It's so great to find ways to meaningfully contribute to the fight for justice, the rule of law, and for humanity. So people, conservatives, will often say they're fighting for humanity, and I've decided that diplomacy, is important. Diplomacy is important, and we have to stress things that we have in common. So when the right say we want to safeguard humanity, I'll say, okay to that. Good, you're on board with me. I too want to safeguard humanity. I just don't want to disregard science I don't want to disregard the evidence of my eyes and ears that Australia was significantly on fire recently. I don't want to disregard the evidence of mass fish kills in Australian rivers occurring as a consequence of increased temperature. I want to live. I want my children to be able to exist in a functional civilization. Civilization is not going to stay the same because things are getting worse with climate, and our hope is still for concerted action. First of all, consensus that concerted action is required, but I'd like it if we kept talking more in fait accompli terms. Like, it's a given that climate change exists. It's a given that it's serious. We really need to be talking about how we mitigate against the problems already being caused, but more significantly, take huge action, huge industry-altering transitional action to help us move away from the fossil fuel industries that currently taxpayers subsidize with billions of dollars in collected taxes, billions of dollars of public money going to support fossil fuel industries. Listen, the Reserve Bank of Australia has recently been advised that they might have to buy coal factories, coal energy, electricity generating stations in order to prevent economic collapse, because that's how many too big to fail sectors of the energy industry are likely to collapse, because people don't want to buy coal anymore, because renewable energy is improving so rapidly that people will want to put up more solar panels in their backyard and derive more of their energy consumption sources from renewable energy. I don't know what it is actually that's contributing to the demise of coal. Probably some contributional factors are political changes, that people in countries where there's not mass deception of the public vote for politicians who promise to take action on climate change. So I know in Australia we're one of the highest adopters of climate skepticism. That is to say, positions that are self-deceptive about climate change, the fact that it's happening, and the nature and degree of the threat that it poses to humans. All right, chaps, I've probably chatted enough. Hopefully I've saved some of this audio so I can put it up for anyone who wants to listen in a podcast. The podcast, if anyone wants to search for it, is DavCat43 Fights Fascism. So you can see the spelling of DavCat43 up there. In fact, I'll post it up there now as a comment. Podcast. DavCat43 Fights Fascism. And it's available on Apple, iTunes, etc. All right. So is there any other exciting news that's happened while I've been talking? How is the Senate going? I've just misspelled available. So I'll fix that. Done. All right. DavCat43 Fights Fascism. So I hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast. If you know of anybody who would be interested in being interviewed and would be comfortable committing their face and voice to sharing a screen with me, I might ask Tom Arnold if he wants to have another interview. If you haven't seen that, it's up on my YouTube channel. It's easier to go back and access that than it is to plow through Periscope, I would imagine. But it was a broadcast on the 7th of January this year. I chatted to Tom Arnold for a good half an hour, and it was interesting. And yes, I hope to be talking to more people soon, including Tara Strong, an American voice actress who has voiced ponies, Twilight Sparkle and My Little Pony, if you have small children like I do. And who else? Oh, Raven from Teen Titans. What a great show. I'm very into children's television. because I admit my children do watch a reasonably significant amount of television, but that's okay because they have quality adult interaction as well, and their vocab is good and they get a lot of physical activity as well. I'm just talking about my children now, but I'll stop. Carol's saying she enjoys your show very much. What channel could you watch the trial? That's a good question. What channel can people watch the trial on? Who knows? Who can answer that? Because I know there's one camera allowed in there. I'll Google, how can I watch the Senate impeachment trial? Oh, it looks like it's here on YouTube as well. That's good. All right, well, I will share the link to that just on here. Copy and paste. So I think normally it would be on C-SPAN, but Mitch McConnell. Ooh. All right. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Okay, I think I've got a link now. Yeah, that is a link to the impeachment trial. So we might go watch it a bit right now. Actually, oh, I can add a different screen. Chrome tab, YouTube. Oh. So I'm wondering if you guys can hear what I can hear, because I can hear Neil Gaiman talking, but you might not be able to hear. Can you hear me? Can anybody write a message about that? Can you hear me now? Okay, now you can't hear anything. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me, but not Neil Gaiman. So, of course, YouTube is giving me an exercise in masterclass writing because they know how much I want to be a writer. All right, Paul's here. Hello, Paul. Thanks for joining in. Can you hear Neil Gaiman talking? Because he's talking about how he can work his way through. This is a great program that I'm using. I'm using a website called StreamYard.com. You can only hear me. Okay. All right, maybe I'll take this out for a second. Okay, that's good. So you can hear me. I hope the volume is reasonably consistent for you all. And soon this ad will be over. Maybe I could have clicked through the ad, but I was enjoying it. I can hear in one ear Neil Gaiman talking about how to work through writer's block. He's saying you need a conviction that you are brilliant and that your writing will set the world on fire and that only you can tell the story. Maybe I can ask for a masterclass for my birthday from my husband. That would be nice. All right, so now it should go to Trump's legal claim. Yes. No more ads. No, I refuse. How can I get rid of this? Skip ad, yay. Okay. Okay, well, that's not the right. Lordy. Now that means that the link I shared before might not have been to a YouTube channel of the impeachment hearing. I thought it was, but somehow I managed to produce a Stephen Colbert clip. Of course, Stephen Colbert is very valuable. A lot of people find their politics easier to ingest with a side dose of humor. And in fact, watchers of The Daily Show scored most highly in a psychological or political poll of who had the best understanding of American politics, or who was best up to date with facts. Oh, Paul really loved my interview with Naroz. That's awesome. I will let him know. He will probably appear again sometime if we can set that up. It's difficult for him. His internet access is not the best, but sometimes people visit him in the detention center where he's resided for the last 4 years at the whim of the Australian government. Prior to that, he was a tax-paying resident who was in the country legally, but whose ongoing quest to obtain an asylum-seeking visa was suddenly denied, and court systems so far have basically found in his favor, but ministers can overrule that. There's a great deal of cruelty meted out from a conservative government, a Trump-style conservative government, you can imagine, to individual asylum seekers living in Australia. The denial of due process, there had to be a court challenge to allow them to have their phones in detention centres, because they're being detained so that they're not part of the Australian population. They're not being detained because they've committed a crime in any way, shape or form. They're just told you don't have a current visa to reside here, so you have to stay in a detention centre. But a legal challenge made it possible for detainees such as Naroz to at least have some of his civil liberties returned to him, namely access to a phone, so he can communicate with the outside world, outside of his own cell in an Australian-run detention centre. Yes, I saw, I haven't watched the whole thing actually, I saw some of his scope with Dan Illick. Yes, I was watching it at bedtime after the children went to bed, but then I was tired, so I do have to catch up on the rest of that. Did you watch it? Did you watch his scope? I'm so glad that I'm bringing a Canadian or American audience to see some of the asylum seekers being detained at the mercy of the Australian government. And when I say mercy, I mean lack of mercy. Our Prime Minister was famous at one point for using a phrase, unfunded empathy. So, we can't have unfunded empathy. Of course, government selects who is going to be empathized with and who is going to be helped. And the Australian government is currently being rocked by a scandal that they used $100 million of taxpayer money to distribute sport grants to various clubs and sporting facilities that were supposed to be decided upon merit. So there was an application process. People from impoverished communities or just less wealthy communities spent hours of their lives filling out arduous application forms describing the needs of their clubs and sporting organizations. And instead, the government, including the Prime Minister, were complicit in a scheme to just distribute that entire $100 million, primarily to sporting organizations in marginal districts, essentially swing districts, so marginal seats where there was a Conservative Party lead, but small. So they wanted to shore up their political advantage, and they distributed $500,000, for example, to a wealthy rowing club in Tony Abbott's seat. Tony Abbott is a former Prime Minister of Australia who's so unpopular that even giving his the rowing club in his suburb, $500,000 didn't help him keep his seat. He was very unpopular and he lost because the well-educated people in that district could no longer countenance his climate change denialism. And even though they couldn't bring themselves to vote for a relatively progressive Labor pro-union party, they voted in an independent woman, former Olympic athlete, who supports the science of climate change, who doesn't deny science, and who encourages political action to be taken on this issue that will kill the grandchildren of wealthy people just as much as it will kill the grandchildren of people with less money. That's great. Well, I'm really glad you enjoyed the scope with Naroz, and I hope he'll come back on again too, so you can listen to him here as well. So C-SPAN's broadcasting the trial on Periscope. I thought C-SPAN wasn't allowed a camera. Perhaps that rule was overturned. I don't know if I got around to answering C. Diddy's question before about what program I'm using. I'm using StreamYard, which allows me to broadcast simultaneously to both Twitter and YouTube. Both to Periscope and YouTube. While I'm putting things up on the screen, I should put up that I also have a Patreon account. I have 2 Patreons who are both amazingly, unbelievably generous and help me commit to this task of broadcasting and help supply me with funds to purchase equipment and things. So Patreon account is Dav Shat. Oops. Yes, you can broadcast for free on StreamYard, but if you want to broadcast to 2 locations simultaneously, you have to pay a monthly fee. All right. So that's the comments section for today. I don't know how much more I can add to the conversation about the impeachment trial, which is ongoing, other than to say, yes, as sad as we are about the fact that Republicans are irredeemable sellouts, it's good for the public to know that, I guess. It would have been better to have witnesses, to have Mike Pompeo called, to have Bolton called. But at the same time, it's to be hoped that this will really doom the political chances of Republican senators that are up for re-election this November in 2020. It's so good to have my voice back. DJ the Pastor, I'm glad you joined in. I still haven't managed to add you yet as a moderator. So if what I do is take a photo of that, maybe that will help me on my to-do list. Okay. So yes, I'll say goodbye, everybody. I've been talking for an hour. How are you doing, DJ? It's good to have pastors on board. Australia is about to introduce some laws allowing religious people to discriminate against people who are gay, people who are transgender, which is going to be a problem. But at least the way to get out of some of that might be to start a new church, so that people can claim religious protections, maybe start a church of inclusiveness, which allows gay people the right to demand to be employed. No, it's difficult. You can't heal all of the industrial relations problems caused by overly favoring religious bigotry against gay people and against transgender people. So, that law is in the works in Australia. Basically, we have a lot of problems similar to America without the same infestation of Russian influence, but we have an evangelical extremist in power somebody who subscribes to the prosperity gospels, in that if you're poor, it's a mark of your bad character. So, of course, somebody in government will do all that they can to avoid helping you and avoid supplying you with help. The prosperity gospels are just a lovely formalized series of rationalizations for wealthy people to avoid paying tax, or to have people elected who give the wealthy tax cuts, whilst leaving the poor and the middle class to pick up the burden of looking after societal infrastructure, because they can't necessarily afford the fancy accountants who will help them avoid paying tax. In the same way that a lot of corporations don't pay corporate tax, pay $0 in tax to Australia, despite making a great deal of profit from Australian consumers. Yes, preying on people instead of praying for them. So anybody who has any tips on how to set up a new church or a new religion, or a name for a new church, the Church of Inclusivity, where we could go back to some of Jesus's original sayings, which is that wealth in and of itself can sometimes blind people to the need for charity. Wealth in and of itself can sometimes harden people's hearts and force them to rationalize a sense of superiority about themselves and their friends, and rationalize an inherent inferiority to people with less money, when a lot of the problems associated with having less money are not bad character problems. They are just problems of it being extremely difficult and extremely depressing to try and get by in a society where the odds are stacked in favor of the wealthy, and the minimum wage is manifestly inadequate, and being less skilled than somebody else is treated as a moral failing instead of as an unfortunate confluence of circumstances that society should actually help people get over. So society should do more to encourage there to be quality preschool education and quality early education that really helps close the gap in terms of educational achievements between children of wealthy parents and children of less wealthy parents. You like my Church of Inclusion? That's nice. I just want to try and create some protections for the people in Australia that will be most marginalised and hurt by the new laws. All right. So I'm not currently in Australia, but there's been rain. So the rain will have taken a lot of the smoke out of the sky. There's also been very destructive hailstorms and dust storms. But in terms of smoke over capital cities, now that will have eased. That won't be the case to the same degree. There is severe fire risk predicted for Thursday and Friday. So there's a lot of people here on the Periscope that are preaching, but they're doing it for dollars. That's going to be hard, isn't it? Because I still have a Patreon account. So if I start a church, I won't be doing it for dollars. I may still invite people to contribute towards me if they want to help me continue what I'm doing, or to fund me so that I can continue to devote my time to this rather than gainful employment that earns money in a more traditional way. But I am ultimately wanting to start a church to help people, to protect people who are more likely to be targets of vestigial hate that doesn't really serve a useful purpose anymore in organizing society around some common values. It just serves to split society, split a segment of society apart from the majority, because the majority of people now don't have a problem with gay marriage. The majority of people now recognize the inherent humanity of people, even if they are gay. And I don't want to say even, so I'll retract that. I'll say the majority of people now are much better at recognizing the inherent worth and the inherent humanity of people who are gay, who happen to be gay, the inherent worth and value of people who experience dysynchrony between their body as it presents phenotypically on the outside and maybe something that's less visible within their body, the balance of androgens and estrogens that is part of their chemical makeup on the inside. They're part of their hormonal balance. People whose brains have been exposed to testosterone, high degrees of testosterone earlier in utero, are perhaps more likely to feel masculine even if they're born with the biological appearance of a woman. Auntie Jane again, thanks for joining in. I'm glad you're back. Oh, Harvested Beets likes my idea. That's a lovely compliment. You're a great person with a heart of gold. Thank you. I am a very fortunate person, fortunate to be able to be doing this at all, fortunate to have the means and the opportunity to be broadcasting to you all. So I also thank my parents for the ability to string 2 words together in a sentence, 2 or more words. Thank you for reading out loud to me and for taking me seriously when I talk to you, so that I felt that I had something of value to say to the world. And I hope to cultivate that. I hope to continue to read and learn so that all that I do reflect back to the world has some value to it. All right, let's see if we can finish off with anything useful. Let's check Twitter and see if anything has happened. The inherent value of humans and life within, beyond and throughout infinite universes. That's nice. Carol, I'm making lots of I'm going noises, but I'm still not ready to go yet because I feel like I want there to be more information. So let's see. I will click on the trending for Twitter hashtag called impeachment trial and see if there's any breaking news. A good point from a very key witness, key reporter. Her name is Heidi. Oh, no, you can't see what I see. So I will go share screen. Share. Chrome tab. So that you can see what I see. Okay. Okay, so Dems are forcing these doomed votes to subpoena Mulvaney, etc., for a reason. The reason, if they fail to get witnesses later, they will have put the most vulnerable GOP senators, Collins, etc., on the record, opposing testimony from material witnesses. Now, that is the silver lining today, which is still a difficult day, to go, okay, there's no Mitt Romney having a conscience. They're all united. They're all shoulder to the boulder to prop up Trump's criminal enterprises. They're all 100% in with betraying America. It is sad. That is sad. But yes, they're still putting through the votes, even when it's already clear from the first vote that no Republicans will break rank to do the right thing to facilitate the provision of witnesses and documents to Trump's Senate impeachment trial. But yes, they're getting them all on the record. They're providing footage for all of the ads that can run during the election season in November, when it won't be so distant for people to forget that Senator Collins voted to betray America, to betray the American public, to rob them of the opportunity to hear more, to hear a more complete picture about Trump's criminal behavior and unethical behavior. So yeah, get them on the record, hold it against them. And in the meantime, we need to campaign at state levels for protection of the integrity of the voting system. Campaign for voting machines to not have internet capabilities, to not connect to the internet, because things that can connect to the internet can be hacked. Oh, Dav represents my name. My name is Dav. And thank you, Rose. Thank you, Paul. Yes, some of you must be going to bed. Maybe that's why Carol was saying good night, not because she thinks I'm going, but because she's going. I will go soon because I've got to get out of my place. It's just had a wall repainted because we had a pipe leak while we were on holiday, and it damaged a wall, and it made everything very moldy and difficult to breathe for a little while. Oh, thank you, Auntie Jane. Auntie Jane, I will post your comment up here. That's very good. Anytime anybody posts something useful like that as a comment, it's something that I will put up so that people can see it. Great idea. I should have put up Rose's comment before as well about the inherent value of humans, but that's okay. Oh, it's probably a secret where I went on holiday. That'd give too much away. Oh, Team Biden going on offense, naming Senate Republicans who supported his actions re Ukraine at the time. That is so key. I'm so glad that Biden's team brought that up. That really is so incriminating for Senate Republicans, that they supported Joe Biden when there was an international movement to oust a corrupt a corrupt prosecutor, a prosecutor who was ousted in the end because he was failing to prosecute corruption. He had been brought in to fix some of Ukrainians' corruption problems after Ukrainians so memorably demonstrated in the streets during the Maidan, or the Velvet Revolution, and ousted their corrupt Putin puppet president. And yes, so Shokin was supposed to be a clean house type of guy, and he was failing to prosecute Burisma, which is the gas company that Hunter Biden was offered a lucrative position on. Was it $50,000 or $83,000 a month that Hunter Biden earned by virtue of being a high-profile American lawyer? So he is a lawyer, a qualified lawyer, and his father was the vice president of the US, but that should not have stopped the company from being prosecuted for corruption if they were corrupt, and they probably were. So, Hunter didn't accept the salary for Joe in a quid pro quo for Joe Biden to stop the prosecution, because Joe Biden took action to oust the prosecutor who was failing to investigate and prosecute Burisma. So that is such an important point. Hi, Craig. Thanks for joining in. Hi, David. Nice to see you all. So yes, that's really important, because Joe Biden will have a lot of evidence on record. It wasn't a secret vote. Senate Republicans supported Joe Biden using the power of American financial might to say, we will withhold financial aid from Ukraine until this corrupt federal prosecutor is ousted. If America suddenly had an economic collapse while Canada was still really strong, this is going to be a hard hypothetical for people to get their heads around, but if Canada was strong and America needed aid from Canada, and they said, you can't go until you get rid of William Barr because he's sabotaging your justice system, that would be an equivalent scenario to what Joe Biden did above board, with backing from the European Union, from leaders such as the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. And so that's great that Team Biden is bringing that issue to the foreground. All right, let's have another look. This is cool that I can look at Twitter live. When I switch tabs and I cross over to look at Twitter, I'm presuming that you can still see my face. Is there continuity of broadcasting of me when okay, so I'll tell you now. I'm going to go look at Twitter, and I'm looking at it. So tell me when I come back if you can still see my face, because right at the moment I'm outside of the broadcasting screen. So I'm presuming you can still hear me, but yes. McConnell, yes, wants to stop the drumbeat of information against Donald Trump. His guys weren't ready to defend this today, and they need more time for strategy because what they're doing isn't working. Isn't that good? Who is Warren Harding? I guess I better look that up. Representative Hakeem Jeffries said, President Trump's complete and total obstruction makes Richard Nixon look like a choir boy. True, because Richard Nixon didn't have Fox News propping him up, so he felt that he had to hand over the tapes, which is interesting. So Schiff performs a masterclass for lawyers. Oh, and the GOP expert witness, the constitutional witness from the House hearings, has apparently now written an article saying that the White House's claim that impeachment requires a crime is bogus. Awesome. Oh, and the media are actually reporting on the false claim by Trump lawyer Pat Cipollone that the GOP weren't able to get access to the secure center. What's Schiff stand for again? Can anybody remind me? Anyway, it's the place that Matt Gaetz stormed with a bunch of his fellow Republican House representatives. But any Republican who was on one of those 3 investigatory committees, the House Committee for Oversight, the House Committee for Intelligence, and what was Nadler chairing? The House Committee, maybe he was the House Oversight Committee. Anyway, 3 different committees. So let's check. I'm coming back now to see from the comments section if you've been able to tell me if you can still see my face. So Auntie Jane saying you have advanced so much since you were here last. I'm so glad. Yes, I am getting quite tech savvy with my broadcasts. I have to thank my behind the scenes friends, particularly one very good, very kind lady who does this, who finds new tech things for me to use. And another friend of mine, Louise, who gave me advice on microphones to purchase so that I could record both a podcast and I hope that's saved. I'm going to do a new one. Save. Okay, sorry. So I can record both audio for podcasts and broadcast live as well. I'm very glad. My kids aren't old enough to help me yet, but I can imagine when they get older, they will also be able to help. Yes, so Warren Harding, so he was an old American president. Interesting. I haven't heard of his name before, although maybe briefly in passing. So evidently he was remarkable for corruption. That's awesome. Yes, secure location. But yes, the actual acronym of Schiff, we can look this up, find this out right now. SCIF, acronym. No, maybe that's not the right thing. So great that you guys can still SCIF. Okay, maybe if I use capital letters. And write secure, because we know it's secure. Secure compartmentalized information facility. So now we'll all feel much more on top of it, the ball, when we hear that. So SCIF, secure compartmentalized information facility, the kind of place where it is forbidden to bring in your mobile phones, and yet Matt Gaetz and other Republican House representatives stormed it with their mobile phones and were tweeting from inside the secure facility, compromising it. I don't really know how the compromise works, but maybe if you bring your phone in and your phone is hackable, then you can be transmitting a signal to hostile foreign agents, etc., like the Russian embassy. So Paul is saying Apple what? Right. So the good thing is you could see me and the Twitter screen even when I personally can't see comments or the broadcasting screen anymore, because I go over to Twitter and I start scrolling like this. That's good that there's no break. There's no break to the continuity of what we can see. So Sekolo started to do the where is the whistleblower thing, but it felt like even he knows that that's the worst possible argument. He just threw it out there to make the president happy and then sat back down. I can only hope in horrible shame. All right, you know what? I've got a second wind. I'm not going anywhere yet. I did start to say my goodbyes before. But hey, I'm excited by my ability to check Twitter online and talk about it with you guys live. Oh, wow. Hakeem Jeffries just quoted Biggie Smalls. If you don't know, now you know. I wonder what this was about. Addressing the issue of whether to call witnesses for President Trump's trial, impeachment manager Hakeem Jeffries is showing data of the long history of US Senate witnesses calling for other impeachment trials. Look at this. I can bring this up right now and show you that there's hundreds of years of precedents in relation to impeached officials, as well as President Clinton. I think they've accidentally put the words Judge Nixon. Oh no, maybe there was a Judge Nixon because that says 1989. Oh yes, and of course Nixon never made it to trial because he resigned prior to even being impeached when he was warned by fellow Republicans that they had the votes to impeach him and that the evidence in the public eye was sufficient to condemn him sufficiently in the public's eye for it to be a thing. All right. Oh, there was a Secretary of War who was impeached as well. And look at all the various witnesses. That's great that Hakeem is using visual aids to emphasize that point. Oh, they were wearing Apple Watches to circumvent the rules. Oh, I literally saw a picture of a GOP rep with a phone in his hand. Yes, and certainly Trump has meetings at Mar-a-Lago, which, would add to the excitement of his guests. So would add to his ability to hype up that $200,000 membership fee that he charges for Mar-a-Lago membership. Am I pronouncing Mar-a-Lago properly? I hope so. So I'll have to look up Warren Harding when I have the opportunity. I like that Auntie Jane's comment. Auntie Jane, if you want your comment to be taken down, if you're not enjoying your profile picture and comment up on screen, anybody can always let me know. It's very easy for me to stop that. I will put David's comment up there now so that we can reflect on the fact that Trump's corruption means America is much less secure. At Trump's instigation, Jared Kushner was also given a security clearance against the advice of seasoned career officials in the clearance department. And the whistleblower for that, what was her name? Trisha something. And Carl, I'll have to look up these names again so that we can remember, because she was complaining that Jared Kushner and his wife, Ivanka Trump, did not pass clearance on any objective measure, and they were still being awarded security clearances. And instead, she was punished within her job. Files were moved out of her reach, and thus hampering her ability to do her job. Trisha, let's look her up. Trisha, whistleblower. Trisha Newbold, maybe. Trisha Newbold. Yes, White House security manager. Wow, she's got her own Wikipedia entry. She even returned to work after she's worked in the executive office of the President of the United States since the year 2000. She works as a manager in the White House's personnel security office. She was born with a rare form of dwarfism. She was suspended for 14 days without pay for refusing to cooperate with procedures implemented by her supervisor. She has alleged that this suspension was made in retaliation for attempting to express her concerns about the granting of security clearances by her office. In March 2019, Newbold spoke privately to the House Oversight Committee, claiming that at least 25 Trump administration officials were granted security clearances over the objections of career staffers. Newbold also asserted that some of these officials, we're talking Kushner, etc., had previously had their applications rejected for disqualifying issues, only for those rejections to be overturned without adequate explanation. On April the 1st, 2019, Elijah Cummings, the committee chair, released a letter detailing Newbold's accusations. Here we go. In a subsequent interview with NBC News, she accused her former boss, Carl Klein, of embarrassing her by moving files to high locations where she could not reach them. So she became the first official currently serving in Donald Trump's White House to take accusations of wrongdoing to Congress and to put her name currently behind them. So I'm now going to post this link to the Tricia Newbold Wikipedia page so that anybody can see it. So her boss was Carl Klein. So he's the Trump appointee who overruled various objections to disqualifying rejections of Jared Kushner and Ivanka. So there were how many? Oh, maybe I can do, no, I can't do two screens, but I could share the screen with something else. No, I'll choose not to do that. So that's very important. We should be singing her name because she is really the first critical whistleblower whose name we know. There's other whistleblowers, but the pattern of criminality did not initiate with Ukraine. We already knew that Trump and his cohort of criminal co-conspirators were obstructing justice as if their life depended on it already. All right, so Schiff has said, let's be real. You think the GOP is hoping to say yes to witnesses? A vote to delay is a vote to deny. They aren't going to have an epiphany. I wonder if the American people are having an epiphany. It's always interesting how to make space psychologically for people to change their mind. So let this be a place where people can come together to share their tips of anybody who has been known to change their mind, to admit that they were wrong. R.I.P. Elijah Cummings. Yes, R.I.P. Rest in peace. Put that up. So yes, you must be getting quite late for some of you guys. I wonder what proportion of Americans are staying up late to be able to watch this. Of course, it's not easy if you have a job to go to the next day. My only job is I have to get up early in the morning to help my children get ready for school and then pick them up in the afternoon and keep a tidy house and buy groceries and cook meals, etc. But I should also be doing other stuff. I should be, if anybody wants to encourage me to do this as well, I'd appreciate it. I should be writing a presentation on how to best empower parents to help with their children's speech and language development. That's my specialty. And I can do both. I can do both amateur political punditry on the ills besetting American politics, UK politics, and Australian politics. Yes, that's a point I've long wanted to make. David's just writing this, saying something very interesting. As long as you take Trump out of the equation, more people can engage with facts. That is so important because Trump attracts that cult following and that cult level suspension of logic and the faculty of reasoning. So if you talk to people about the corruption of people associated with Trump without specifically mentioning Trump, then you can potentially make more progress. So yes, because I think that was a critical factor for my dad when some of those arrests were made of Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, what's Paul Manafort's? Rick Gates. Rick Gates was Paul Manafort's deputy campaign chairperson. He just received quite a reduced sentence because of the degree of his cooperation. So yes, I'm presuming David's going to finish writing his comment. that says when you take Trump out of the equation, more people engage with the facts around corruption. And Americans don't like being taken for suckers. So I think that's a very important point, that we can't just be using Trump as a polarizing figurehead to talk about. Yes, he polarizes. And yes, he's a cult figure in that people have suspended their ability to think because they've conflated Trump's confidence with American security. They think the more confident Trump sounds, the more America will flourish. And to a degree, they're right. Americans have always been taught, think it, be it, or something. What is it? Fake it till you make it. So for Americans who believe that that's a driving principle of how to get things done, it doesn't matter if Trump's telling the truth or not. He's faking it till he makes it on America's behalf in the realms of national security, economic growth, etc. Now, there must be some people for whom the fake it till you make it argument is wearing thin. And there must be some independent farmers in various battleground states, such as Wisconsin, where farmers have suffered so much, where even Trump's lavish giveaways of public money, $28 billion worth of public money, is being so poorly distributed that there's so many bankruptcies and so many suicides of farmers who are in so much debt and are struggling so much to even provide for their own families, let alone sustain a business that involves undertaking a great deal of initial debt. Yes, thanks, David. I try to be sharp. Hooray. So let's write out strategies for today. Oh, no, can't see that. What if I do this? Haha. Okay. Well, I guess if I just write over this side of the board. All right. Strategies. I do love whiteboards. You might be able to tell that I'm something of a teacher, have enjoyed something of a career in the teaching profession. All right, strategies. Not to waste your time too much with people who will just suck your energy and be obdurate Trump supporters, but for people who you think it might be possible to get through to, so address corruption, associated with people in Trump's orbit. So Trump has been a massive boon to the Republican Party. They can pretend that they don't like him sometimes, that he's too crass, or they don't like his tweets. But his circus ringleader approach has provided them with a lot of cover to advance policies that are broadly unpopular with Americans. So you can ask them to look up what's happening with the Affordable Care Act, with protections for pre-existing conditions. So yes, we know areas where Trump is most vulnerable to people hearing the real information, because that's sometimes where he lies the hardest, or his lies are such a significant departure from the truth. So when Trump says, I am the only one who's protecting your pre-existing conditions associated healthcare, that means he really needs people to believe that. He really needs people to listen to him as the self-proclaimed sole arbiter of truth. So anything we can get out there to say, well, actually, the conservative Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, is it John Roberts? Chief Justice Roberts has moved a decision regarding pre-existing conditions, has moved that to after the election, so that Trump, he doesn't openly say this, but essentially it will be so that Trump doesn't suffer from the electoral blowback of finding out that all of these millions of Americans have lost healthcare coverage because they have pre-existing conditions, and Trump's administration took the Affordable Care Act to court in order to overturn the provision for people with pre-existing conditions. So yes, Trumpers like the Affordable Care Act, but they hate Obamacare. Yes, we have learned more about the degree to which racism has poisoned the thinking of conservative Americans. And that's why it's important for us to note repeatedly and always that racism does not merely have to be active acts of persecution, like literally lynching somebody or physically hurting them. There are ways to hurt African American communities and African American individuals by undermining their voice and undoing their achievements and rewriting history to downplay their successes, so that you can inflict harm on the American public, all by taking advantage of this passive racism, this inability to engage with facts when the facts show an African American leader acting in a good light. So Obama did a lot to reinvigorate the American economy. The trajectory of that economy, having dropped significantly in the Bush years, was going up and up and up. And then Trump starts here, the economy continues on its upwards trajectory, and Trump claims this to be a point of difference, that this direction has changed and that any economic growth happening in his tenure has been a massive departure from economic failure under Obama, which is the opposite of reality. And the fact that this particularly impactful lie is under-discussed in American media is one reason why we have to plug those holes. We have to do that job for the media. Twitter is like an engine of news. If we just talk to people we know, then yes, we're keeping ourselves happy in a bubble of nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, I believe. But if we use Twitter, the opportunity it affords us to make contact with journalists, to respond en masse to particular questions, to start hashtags for ourselves that then become so big that they do get reported on in mainstream media, we can hold journalists better to account, and we can demand that they talk about some of the issues which they are underreporting on. And one is the consequence of Trump's lie, that Trump lied that this change in economic trajectory happened here. This was not Trump. This was Obama, and this was the trajectory under Obama. So the precipitous fall initiated from Bush by spending so much of your taxpayer money, trillions of taxpayer dollars in warfare against a Middle Eastern country, Iraq, which was not involved in 9/11 and did not have weapons of mass destruction. So all of the economic downfall of America was attributable to the Republican performative militarism that says, feel better, you've felt insecure because of Islamic terrorism, regain your sense of security through us throwing millions upon millions of dollars at activities that will kill so many brown people that you will feel avenged against brown people. So Bush let Americans pile their insecurities and pile their fears into a relentless money pit of misdirected money pit of vengeance against people who were different. Bush enabled a big, expensive, costly, and physical in the lives of American soldiers, as well as hundreds of thousands of lives of Iraqi civilians, in the pit of misdirected vengeance against an outgroup, people who are not Americans. Yes, of course, we need to stay in a bubble of information for self-protective psychological reasons, but we can still talk to journalists. Journalists are not ostensibly MAGA supporters. They are sometimes complicit in promoting Donald Trump because of their irrational adherence to a both sidesism type of professional etiquette. So when they say, okay, we have to look at both sides to give the impression that we're fair and balanced, so we'll have to try and dig for equal amounts of truth. We'll report on some things that are true about the Democrat Party, and then we'll just, to make it even, we'll just have to pretend that some of the things the Republicans saying are true. We'll have to pretend that Hillary Clinton's emails are the worst thing ever, just so we're reporting on truth, because the Democrats are making all these allegations about Trump. We'll have to balance that out with allegations against Hillary Clinton, even though, as multiple investigations have made clear to the American public now, there was no criminal activity or significant malfeasance associated with Hillary Clinton's email account. There was no there. The fact that even Trump-appointed investigators have not found Hillary Clinton guilty of anything, that, multiple investigations have now concluded she's not going to jail. She didn't do anything wrong. I wonder how Rachel Maddow does it. I guess she gets ad breaks. I do not have ad breaks to discreetly drink water off camera. I could just do this. This water bottle is not the easiest to drink from. I bought it for my daughter. She's 4 and she likes unicorns, but she can't take off the lid very well, actually. This is why I should have taken her shopping with me to go, let's try. Next time I buy a water bottle, I will. But in the meantime, I guess I'm stuck for personal usage with a very colorful water bottle. Yes, Hillary Clinton keeps getting cleared while Trump people keep going to jail. Yes, the stock market. I think we should do more investigative work to uncover what exactly it is that they're doing to inflate the stock market, because I think it's being artificially inflated. I think there's likely to be a crash. Productivity hasn't increased as much as the stock market has, and the Fed is pumping millions of dollars into it. Thanks, Auntie Jane. You stayed for ages. I really appreciate it. Maybe I should go and save my voice while I can. I'll be inspired by your departure, Auntie Jane. And next time I come, I resolve to get myself up to speed more with what's happening in the stock market. When I do talk to Trump to people of my acquaintance, those who know Americans say they know wealthy Americans who tell them, my 401k has just gone up so much. Like, how could I complain about Trump when I'm personally financially benefiting so much from his achievements? And I am adding quotation marks around achievements because, of course, Trump is horrific for the American economy. Actually, he's instituted tariffs that have wrought devastation upon American farmers and devastation upon the manufacturing industries. So no, I'll find some more summaries of ways in which Trump has exerted negative downwards pressure on the US economy, and that he's just the fact that the stock market obviously likes a liar. The stock market obviously likes a showman who can talk up the stock market and so pump it up. Fake it till you make it is a saying that is being gleefully embraced by the stock market until they will, I guess, significantly crash at some point in the future. Probably not all that distant future. Gold is still increasing in value, which shows some people have enough sense to be uneasy about investing their money in stocks. That they understand that there's a degree of bubble happening, that the purported value of stocks is a little bit untethered from reality at this point, much in the same way that all of Trump's pronouncements are untethered, highly untethered from reality. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got Trump's face up there. We don't like that. Jeffries is replaying a video where Trump said he'd love his senior aides to testify. Oh, my doorbell's also rung. I'd better go. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll talk again soon to you all another time. Hopefully tomorrow. Bye. Why aren't you ending? Oh, end.